Dr. Reeves, who will be our first speaker, he too is a practitioner who, in observing in his practice, looked and said, something is not right. Something doesn't go together. We need to know more about it. And I will let him continue to tell you more about how he came to make the links between cardiovascular health and the environment. I am not going to take the time to read his CV. You all have it before you. Just to say he is an eminent cardiologist, and we invite him to come and give us a talk.
First of all, it's really a privilege for me to be invited in front of such a distinguished audience, and especially meeting Mrs. Minigri, which is really a true inspiration for all of us. I'm an interventional cardiologist. What does it mean? It means those guys who wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, as I've done last week, because I was on call, to open arteries for people having heart attacks. And I spend my life doing that, teaching that, searching in that field. And lately, in the last 5 years, I turned some of my research interests toward what I may call now environmental cardiology. Just a few months ago, there was this big breathtaking news from the World Health Organization saying that there's more than 7 million premature deaths annually linked to air pollution. And it represents one out of 8 of total global deaths. So now the WHO addressed the quality of air as being the major, the first problem, or the public enemy number one. And what they find out, moreover, is that about the air pollution caused death, 40% are from ischemic heart disease, 40% from stroke. So that's where the cardiovascular specialists feel implicated in such an issue. So why do we do heart attacks and stroke? Because being awakened every 5 days for 25 years, sometimes you may say, may I have a relief? Is there something else we can do? And may we take the cause at the origin? So there was the huge and the well-renowned Framingham heart study. Every physician knows the Framingham study that was established in 1948. And what we found out is that the risk factors for having atherosclerosis, which is the disease that block the arteries, which is the disease that provoke heart attacks and stroke. Well, atherosclerosis is caused by heredity, diabetes, tobacco, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, sedentary, obesity, and stress. And this is very robust nowadays. With all the studies that were done and repeated, this is very robust, and there's no doubt about that now. However, we may say, did Framingham say everything? Because when I was writing the first book in 2007, about the general risk factors, and this was for a general public reading, there was a slide from the WHO organization that I really did not understand, and really it mystified me. It's this slide. This slide represents the death from the disease of the circulatory system for people aged from 25 to 64 for Europe. It was published in 2008. And well, the name of the countries are very small. Let's put a few. And what you see is that you have this gradient of mortality from Switzerland to Austria to Poland to Russia, having a death rate of 60 in Switzerland, 60 per 100,000 people, to more than 750,000 people in Russia. So you have the 1,000% of difference between those two countries. And you see this huge difference. I mean, from a cardiologist standpoint, that's huge, that's enormous. But if you come back first, why did the United States start the Framingham study in 1948? Well, if you look at the website, it's very interesting to see the beginning of big studies of big new trends. It was said at this moment in 1948, just after the Second World War, that little was known about the general causes of heart disease and stroke, but the death rates for cardiovascular disease have been increasing steadily since the beginning of the century and had become an American epidemic. In fact, in 1948, the American public authorities realized that at the age of 50, 1 American out of 3 was suffering from a heart attack. 1 out of 3 at the age of 50. I feel concerned. Yeah, everyone here knows that when the USA gets a cold, usually Canada coughs. So what happened in Canada during this meantime? And we observe exactly the same time, okay, the same statistic. We see that the rate of cardiovascular mortality starting in 1920 was increasing, and the peak is exactly with the States, about 1950. And then it decreased progressively. You may say, well, it's normal that you have more and more cardiac deaths since people are getting older and older. But it's not sufficient to explain that, because if you look at the progression of the life expectancy, you have a steady curve, but you have a total dichotomy with the curve of the cardiovascular mortality. So, and let's come back now, let's have a, let's see, a historical and physiological standpoint. Always with the eyes of the cardiologist, with the eyes of the heart. For atherosclerosis, which is actually the largest plague over the world, it's rare in animals. David Suzuki used to tell us that we are animals, yes, but we really change our milieu. It was rare within humanity before 1830, before the Industrial Revolution. And it's also rare within humanity living totally outside the industrial world. Atherosclerosis may be inducible in animals. In fact, it's an excellent medical bench test. And everywhere in the history of this planet, following the traditional industrial revolution, you assist to a dramatic increase of cardiac morbidity, and you can see it everywhere. Actually, it's in China and in India. So I think we can redefine a new way to address atherosclerosis and heart disease by 3 trials. First, what we are. It's been our genetic tendency to have high cholesterol, hypertension, diabetes. What we do, sedentary, obesity, and tobacco. And moreover, and that's what I will address this morning, where we are. Environment, food, and consider food as being part of the environment, because the way you eat here is not the same that in Paris, not the same that in Ireland, etc. So food is truly part of the environment, and a bread is not the same in New York and Montreal and in Paris for sure. And where we are will influence what we do. What we do will influence what we are. And moreover, and I will address that as well, where we are, we will address the expression of the risk of having high blood pressure, diabetes, and high cholesterol. Einstein used to say that environment is everything that's not me. So that's easy, that's simple, that's clear. And the exchange with the environment is on a solid phase, liquid phase, gaseous phase, and what we eat. It's about 1 kilogram of food a day. What we drink, about 2 liters, so 2 kilograms of beverage a day. But what we breathe, since we are breathing about 10 to 20,000 of liters of air a day, it's very easy to measure, then we will breathe about 10 to 20 kilograms of air. And this is a fact that is really underestimated. During the Industrial Revolution, there was a lot of benefits for all, for sure. But there was the introduction of a lot of nanoaggressors, not that much, but of nanoaggressors all in our environment. Let's call the food nanoaggressor, and we will address salt in excess, high fructose corn syrup, which is the main ingredient of the colas, trans fat, phosphoric acid, and pesticides. And the airborne nanoaggressors, every time you burn any fossil fuel, you will put in the atmosphere dioxide of carbon, NO2, SO2, the fine particles, ultrafine particles, the volatile organic compounds as pH, ozone, lead, and mercury. Addressing the fact of mercury, where does all this mercury is coming from? And if you look at the papers in biology, it's coming from the burning of coal. As simple as that. All the mercury you see over the planet and up north as well is coming from coal. About the industrial food, this picture is really I think it says it all. Because you see, this is the grocery for a week for this family of North Carolina. And if you look at the food, there's nothing fresh in that. It's all processed. There's a huge amount of high fructose corn syrup, a huge amount of salt, a huge amount of salt. And you see, this is a very typical American point of view. The North Carolina family fights the effects of abundance, the so-called abundance, with exercise. But I can tell you, as a cardiologist, if I have to eat that, I have to run a lot to get rid of that. I can tell you. And in fact, this is one of the main factors why you have such an explosion of obesity in the States. This is the statistics in 2010. And we see that 13 states of America, in those 13 states, you have more than 30% of people being obese. And it's still growing up. And the main collateral damage of obesity is diabetes, because the main cause of the adult diabetes is excess of weight. And what we have seen, and this is just during all my career, for 90 to 205, you see that the numbers of diabetes in the States passed from 5 million people to 15 million people. I published this data from the Center for Disease Control in my first book in 2007, but I wonder, while I was preparing this talk, how is it today? Well, today in 2014, it's 29 million people suffering from diabetes. And also, as from the cardiologist standpoint, the diabetes is the worst aggressor for arteries. Everything's more complicated. All the odds are really not good for diabetes. If you go in Mexico and see those people having, well, Dr. Richard Bilbao would be pleased to see that, all the fresh foods, all the vegetables, the fruits, breads, etc. But there's a virus that's coming from the States just behind there. It's not the virus Ebola, it's Coca-Cola. It's slow death. And you see, this is truly the invasion of the industrial foods, all the emerging countries explaining the explosion of the cardiometabolic syndrome all through the world. Now, about environmental cardiology, I would say there's a few milestones. First of all, in 1952, the Great London Smog really bring a wake-up call, because they realized during the single episode of smog that there was 12,000 deaths in excess in London just to a single episode of smog. Thereafter, they measure, well, having a huge episode of smog, it's normal that it may kill people, but with the chronic, usual pollution, what do we measure? And what they have, and it was published, well, recently, or not 2009, for me it's not recent, but at the scale of humanity it's recent. And they reported the number of deaths per day in London, plotted to the British smoke concentration, I mean the pollution. And what we see is a perfect correlation. In other words, if you tell me the level of pollution on this day, I can predict you the number of deaths at the end of the day. A really pivotal study was the 6-city study that was driven by Dockery and Arden Popery, two teeners, two scientists in the field of environmental health. And this study that was published, that's all stuff, 1993. But I can tell you, as a cardiologist, I was not aware at all of this study. It was just only recently when I introduced myself to the environmental aspect. They find out that over a follow-up of 16 years, among 6 American cities, that if you compare the least to the worst polluted city, at the end of this follow-up, there was a difference of 25% of mortality, just in 16 years, among 6 American cities, which usually look the same. And something that we discovered at this moment, and it really addressed the cardiologists, is that more than 50% of this excess of death were cardiopulmonary. In 2004 and 2010, the American Heart Association addressed this problem, and they put 2 statements. And moreover, they have reviewed a lot of studies. And what we see for this meta-analysis is that, sorry, it's very small. For each increment of 10 micrograms per cubic meters of fine particles, you have an increment of 10 to 25% of cardiopulmonary disease, cardiovascular death, and ischemic heart disease. It was explained well after, and you see that every time that you burn fossil fuels, maybe coal, it may be gas, kerosene, oil, natural gas, etc., every time you burn fossil fuels, you will emit sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, fine particles, ultrafine particles, that will induce an oxidative stress, systemic inflammation, blah, 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 to finally go to the, at the end, heart disease, the type of disease I treat every day. The thing to remember amongst this busy slide, oxidative stress and systemic inflammation. More than 500 studies were published about that. That's what I read, I reviewed to finally publish Planet Care and Planet Heart, the English version. And this is the most spectacular experience that was done. It was done at the Columbia University in New York by Dr. Foster, which is one of the most revered cardiologists of the planet. Very interesting experience. Two groups of mice that were fed normally and with a high-fat chow. At 6 months, the mice were sacrificed, and what we see here is the aorta in blue, and in red, the plaque of atherosclerosis, well, the disease that I unblock every day with my balloon and my stents. So you're not surprised that with the high-fat chow, you have a larger plaque of atherosclerosis occluding the artery compared to the mice who have eaten the normal chow. But the interest of this experience is they compare, it was a 2x2 experience, filtered air to polluted air. And it was not that much. It was an average of 10 microgram per cubic meter of fine particle. Okay, something you may breathe every time around the Autoroute Ville Marie. And what you see is that in the polluted air, the mice, that were eating a normal chow have a huge plaque of atherosclerosis. But moreover, you have the synergy of the two risk factors. I mean, here you have this huge plaque of atherosclerosis due to polluted air added to high-fat chow. In fact, this is the animal reproduction of an everyday situation, somebody eating fast food in a polluted downtown. In 2008, well, I bring you some evidence, but for Canada, it doesn't really make a difference nowadays. Well, according to David Boyd and Stephen Genius, yes, because they have made the estimate that due to the environment, you have in Canada 20,000 deaths in excess, 5 to 11,000 cardiovascular deaths, 33 to 67,000 cardiac hospitalization, for a total of $9.1 billion. This is not a marginal issue, this is a huge issue. And moreover, the OECD made a prospective for up to 2050, and finally air pollution will be worldwide the first cause of premature death. So let's come back to the figure that really mystified me at the beginning, well, began my interest in the so-called environmental cardiology. If you look at this slide in a different manner, instead of in by rank, sorted by rank, you have it geographically. Well, it was totally a hazard. I found out this publication by the WHO as well in the European Heart Journal, and then you have the disposition of all this mortality. In green, it's low, and the redder it is, it's higher. So you have this gradient, and if you look here, well, for France, Spain, and Italy, it's quite low compared to Russia and to Finland. Well, it's probably red wine. It's probably the garlic. It's probably the vegetarian diet. But you know something that Canadians understand very well. Up north, they have to warm their house, and mostly with fossil fuels. So the northern you have, the higher you have this rate of cardiovascular death. And finally, I found out this other slide that will support this hypothesis. It's coming from the European Space Agency exactly at the same period, it published in 2008. And what you have here is in blue, low rate of even of smog, and the redder, you have a higher number of exit of smoke. And you have again this correlation north-south, east-west. I was quite happy to find out this at the scale of the continent, but really not the first, because in 2006 it was published in Circulation Research by Dr. Aruni Bhatnagar, and here you have up there, the rate of fine particles over the states. You see Los Angeles there with this renowned smog, and here all the area around the coal plants. And you see that the number of deaths in excess increase around those high polluted areas. So at the scale of Europe, at the scale of America, you see clearly, truly, this difference according to the environment for the risk of having a heart attack or heart arrest. And moreover, there was a very good series in The Lancet. I suggest you to read that because this paper have done, this journal have done a lot of publication. And one of the conclusions is very interesting after saying that yes, air pollution is a trigger for heart attack. Our study confirms previous reports and indicates that the magnitude of pollution health effects may be larger than previously recognized. These results suggest that efforts to limit long-term exposure to fine particulate pollution are warranted. This is hygiene. This is hygiene exactly as Pasteur explained us 150 years ago, that there were very small germs that nobody sees and you have to wash your hands, etc. Pasteur did not invent any medication, but he changed profoundly our world by understanding what's going on. And now, after the microaggressors, now is the era of the nanoaggressors, and we should be aware of that. What about environment and the classic cardiac risk factors? Because as a professor of medicine, I teach my students that you have heredity, high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, etc. But what about environment? I mean, if one presents with high blood pressure, diabetes, high cholesterol, obesity, does environment play a role? Yes, I can tell you this is a very, very busy slide. I won't go through that for sure. But just to let you know that all the mechanics of understanding how come breathing air pollution will induce a lot of physiological sense. In French, it's not easy, imagine. And to understand that, it's not only that it stinks, it really induces a lot of harmful effects. Pollution will induce high blood pressure, that's very well proven. Pollution will exacerbate the complication of diabetes, and in some circumstances, especially in pregnant women, they will induce diabetes. But moreover, I was really mystified by this one. It's the association of childhood obesity with the exposition to the polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, let's say PAH, okay, PAH. Where does PAH coming from? It's from your exhaust. You simply have to start with your car, and at the exhaust you have all the PAH, okay? It's coming from the fossil fuels again. And what they realized, it was a study done in New York amongst young pregnant women, and they measured very precisely with a device put on the lady that measured precisely the rate of PAH, okay, all through her pregnancy. And what they found out is that amongst the mother who were largely exposed to PAH, you have more small weight babies, exactly as for smokers, okay? But moreover, they carry on to follow those kids, and at the age of 5 and at the age of 7, they realized that for those kids whose mother was exposed to a high rate of HAP, you have 50% more obesity amongst those kids. So you have a new application of what I may call the environmental fetal cardiology. And yesterday it was very interesting to see at the Eco Défi a presentation by Dr. Sikulera, and who told us that the critical portion of life for exposure, it's the 9 months of pregnancy and the 2 first years. So this 2 years and 9 months, is very critical about the exposure to toxins. So does it help if we clean air? It seems that yes. This is another huge study done again by Dr. Arvind Pope. A huge study, as the American can do. 2 million people followed over 150 neighbor in 50 cities. And what we've seen at the end of the follow-up, that was over 14 years, that everywhere you drop the level of the fine particle emitted by fossil fuels, you have an increase of the life expectancy. And what really strikes me in this slide is that you have total city here having an increase of life of 4 to 5 years in 14 years. But I can tell you, if I can find out a medication that can increase the life expectancy of a whole city by 4 or 5 years, I would have a Nobel Prize. About the usual issues now, global warming, urban health islands, pollution, a lot of things we can do. We should, for sure, drastically drop our use of fossil fuels and to renew our energy. But we have also to protect and to plant trees. And what we realize from the latest science available about that is that plants really do a huge role about cleaning air. It's not only taking out the CO2 and emitting the oxygen, but it's also, it really clean up the air totally. Is it important? Does it make a difference for us? The best study I found out was in Scotland from Richard Mitchell and Frank Popham. It was published in the Lancet. Old stuff as well, 2008. And they have done a tremendous study. They followed 40 million of non-retired British subjects over 5 years. And they recorded all the death record, more than 360,000 death recorded. And they divided this population in 4 quartiles according to income. And it's not a surprise that the rich are in better health than the poor, not a surprise. But the originality of this study is 5 quartiles according to green exposure. And this is the result. Here you have the 4 quartiles for each group, from the least to the most exposed to green space. And you realize that the difference of mortality, and the baseline is the richest, okay, second group's the second less richest, and finally the last cohort here, 25% of the lowest income. But you realize that the greener you are, you see a diminution of the difference of mortality, of cardiovascular mortality between the rich and the poor. And in fact, if you put numbers on that, generally speaking, with a green space exposure, we have 6% less mortality for everybody. But what is really spectacular is you observe also a reduction by half of the difference of cardiovascular death rate between the poor's lower quartile and the richest higher quartile. That's incredible at this scale, 40 million people, you see. And again, if I could find out a medication that could reduce by half the difference of the cardiovascular death due to the socioeconomic status, that's another Nobel Prize. Plant trees. So to summarize, a cardio-productive city should eradicate food nanoaggressors, eradicate airborne nanoaggressors, develop with the renewable energy, earth, wind, water, fire, this is geothermy, this is helium, this is hydraulic, this is solar, reconnect with nature, and I think we have a lot to learn from the native people here to reconnect with nature and to aim at the 20% urban connectivity. If a city eliminates the food nanoaggressors, the air nanoaggressors, and promotes a green and active milieu, this city may expect a 25 to 75% reduction of cardiac disease. Remember, before 1830, it was quite rare, the cardiac disease, as we know it today. And to cite Dr. Salim Yusuf, probably the most renowned Canadian cardiologist, who was the PI of the Emperor study, covering more than 70 countries. Dr. Yusuf said, after all, CVD was not common in 1830, so why cannot it become uncommon by 2050? That's the challenge we all face, and environment is part of this challenge. So I hope I interest you with this consideration and that give you some more hints in the future to share those knowledge between different specialties, and if you're interested by the subject, it was published either in French and in English. In French, Planète Cœur aux éditions du CHU Saint-Justine en 2011. In English, Planet Heart by the Greystone Books editors. And I want to thank you so much to take your time and to assist this very important meeting.